Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus arcade video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Capcom vs SNK Millennium Fight 2000 Pro, released in 2001 on the Sega Naomi arcade hardware. You'll see right here it says Capcom vs SNK Pro Japan. Of course this only runs on Japanese BIOS. And instead of playing this with the standard Neo Geo CD controller, I'm going to be using this, which is the Sega Dreamcast controller, since this game actually supports this. But, of course, since it only runs in Japanese BIOS, it only will use the controller when it's in Japanese BIOS. But just a quick little thing here. There's the standard I/O board. And then, of course, the video goes directly from the Naomi, which is this cable down here. This video cable down here, directly into the video converter, then into from HDMI into the Elgato, and then it's outputting out to this screen that you see right here. So we're just going to go ahead and get right out of this and get right into the game. And whenever the video converter thing turns on and off, it always displays that little thing in the top corner. Now it's going to load game, and then we'll get right into this. And as you can see, the game starts with the Capcom logo, which is going to lead right into your intro. So take a look at this.
Capcom. Capcom versus SNK.
And as you can see, this is the Capcom vs SNK Millennium Fight 2000 Pro version. This is the only Sega Naomi GD-Rom version and was released on May of 2001. And of course, the way that this works is you have your Capcom groove and your SNK groove. The only real difference in the way that the grooves work is it's how like your special moves and stuff work for your like ultra combos and stuff. I don't know what exactly they call them, like supers or ultras or whatever in this game. But I'm gonna choose a bunch of the characters that I like from various Capcom and SNK fighting games. So I chose Cammy, Benimaru, Sakura, and Dan, who Dan is actually exclusive to this version of the game. Dan wasn't actually in the original version, so if you have this for console or if you have it in for the arcade like me, that's when you get Dan. And now this game runs on the Naomi GD-Rom arcade hardware. The two new fighters of this, of course, as I just mentioned, Dan Hibiki here and Joe Higashi from SNK. So basically you had one character added on each site with this Millennium version. I mean with this Pro version as opposed to the regular version. Another thing that was done in the Pro version as opposed to the standard version is all of the EX characters are unlocked by default, whereas in the original version of this game you actually had to enter unlock codes in the test menu. So that actually does help, so the arcade operators could have this all locked. And I think some of the characters were locked, like the Ratio 4 characters such as Evil Ryu and Akuma weren't playable from the get-go, so they had to actually be unlocked with those same type of codes. And now, as far as ports go, I believe this actually did have quite a few. There was Capcom vs SNK Millennium Fight 2000. Well, there was a port to Dreamcast, and there was a port to Sony PlayStation. strangely enough, the Dreamcast port was in June of 2001 in Japan, whereas the PlayStation port wasn't until April of 2002. It could be because they had to kind of remake this whole game in the PlayStation version. They had to take longer to do the whole reworking of it. And one thing I definitely love about games like this, and even my previously reviewed Marvel vs. Capcom 2 game that I had taken a look at, the thing I like about these games is like the crazy mashups you can have of various characters who normally you wouldn't see together. And of course, this is one of the characters that I was a huge fan of in the King of Fighters. Maybe I'm just out of practice, because what you'll see here, I don't do all that well, but I just tend to not seem like I'm doing too well with Benny Maru here. Now, what's kind of weird is I've actually seen people on some websites say that those operator codes actually work on this version. But in the game test mode option in this game, there is actually no password option like is required to enter these codes. You had to enter these like multi-digit numerical codes, and you see I just kind of got like totally wiped out. Now, the way that the ratios work is basically what you have here is when you pick your characters, you can have up to a ratio of 4. And the more that each character takes up, like the more of a ratio that one character has, the least characters you can pick. So if you pick 2 ratio 2 characters, or 3 ratio 1, like 2 ratio 1 and a ratio 2, or of course 1 ratio 3 and a ratio 1, or 1 ratio 4 character, the only thing that you will get with your higher ratio characters is they're actually stronger, such as Goki, better otherwise known as Kuma. There's the evil Ryu, and there's a few other characters who are like the ratio 4 and the ratio 3 characters, and they just have a lot stronger attacks than your standard characters would have, so they actually give you a bit of an advantage when you're fighting against some of the evil, harder boss characters. And now it's one of those moves that like I do a little bit while I'm fighting against these characters, but it's one of those moves that like when my friends and I would play games like this and you had one of those grab moves that was kind of hard to escape and it just kept on going over and over again. It was one of those things that I always got annoyed with when I would play with friends and they would just basically spam the heck out of these types of moves. But, you know, these days it doesn't bother me as much because I know how to get out of that kind of stuff better. Now, what I actually had started mentioning earlier is I was looking at the wrong part of the history, but the whole series of like Capcom versus SNK games really started with a Neo Geo Pocket Color game in 1999 called SNK vs. Capcom: The Match of the Millennium. And then it was followed by this game, which was Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000, and then 2000 Pro the following year, 2000 and 2001 for Pro here. And then, of course, in that same year, you had Capcom vs. SNK 2, Mark of the Millennium 2001. And then the final one was SBC Chaos SNK vs. Capcom 2003. Then that's just for the SNK vs. Capcom type games. And that's another thing that's really cool about this game, is there's a lot of nice stages and really good music. And now if you're wondering about the EX characters, which as you've seen I've selected, but if people know a lot about this game, they probably get mad and tell me that I know nothing about it, because I can honestly tell you, I've played a decent amount of this game, but I wouldn't consider myself any kind of expert. What I was saying about the EX characters, when you select a character and hold start, the character should change to EX, and of course this does not work with all characters who have like a 4-person evil equivalent or the 3-person characters. So like Ryu has evil Ryu, so you can't have EX Ryu, which makes no sense. And from what I understand, it just actually switches up some of their moves a little bit. And since Dan is actually a new character in this whole game, he doesn't have an EX character either. And I remember when I was playing this, I was like so very happy I actually beat somebody as Dan, and I was thinking to myself, oh, they're gonna just totally destroy me and it's gonna look horribly bad. But if I recall, one of the games I was playing at one point, I played as Dan and I didn't do too badly. Now, I honestly have no idea why the device I used to upscale the video from the arcade, it just actually cuts a little bit of the top and bottom off. But all you're really missing is like the top of the timer, a little bit of their heads, and then the bottom of the ABC AS display. Now, another thing worth making mention of this particular game is, since this is a Naomi game that only uses the Japanese BIOS, a lot of Capcom games actually do this, but it uses the, you can use a Dreamcast controller when you play this, which is what I'm actually playing with it now, which I probably made a brief mention of in the beginning. But, one of the really cool things, of course if I didn't mention it already, is that this uses the rumble pack, so as you're playing this, just like you would in a home version of this game, there is just the standard kind of rumble that you would have. And I just thought that was a really cool thing. Other games that I have that actually support this feature are Marvel vs. Capcom 2, Muaru Justice Gaken, Gunspike. But the only thing to make note of, if you're watching this video and thinking, oh great, my Naomi is going to be able to do this, Dreamcast controller thing, is first of all you have to wire a 5-pin JST NH to Dreamcast extension cable to your CN6 and CN7, if you want 2 players, of course. And of course you need to be running Japanese BIOS, and it only works in certain games. It does not work in any of the Virtua Fighter games. Of course not the initial Ds, because you need the JVS IO for that. And that's another thing that's worth mentioning, that regardless of like using a Dreamcast controller or not, you need to have a IO board, either JAMA to JVS or JVS, attached and powered, even though you're technically not using it. Because, like, for instance, at any given time I can lift up the controller I have wired up to the JAMA harness, and I can just start playing this with that instead of the Dreamcast controller. Of course, what I'd be losing is the actual ability to have that rumble support, and as I had showed earlier, see the little display on the VMS, which was actually pretty nice. But another thing to make mention of is that you actually need to change that in your game configuration, or this will not work. And that's one of those things that really took me by surprise, because I was getting into my my ultra combo there, and all of a sudden he throws his at me, and I was like, oh wow, I didn't realize that like he got me and I didn't get him. But now, as I was saying about the grooves earlier, the grooves came from, what it's saying here in the history.dat is the grooves came from one of the company's games. Capcom's groove came from the Street Fighter Alpha series, which lets you power up your meter up to 3 levels. You can vary the strength of your super based on the buttons you press. The SNK groove came from King of Fighters 94 and 96. In King of Fighters 97 and 98, it was under the extra system. The meter increases as you are attacked, or you can charge it yourself by pressing the hard punch and hard kick. When your health is low, your supers become more powerful. So it's kind of like, if you've ever played like Battle Arena 2 Shinden with its desperation moves, or Dead or Alive 5 with its power blow moves, where it's something where if you're hurt a certain amount, you can do a super strong attack, but let's say in the beginning of a round, it's something that's not available to you, because really when you're just starting off the game, it's not really a big deal, so you really don't need like some sort of overpowered attack. And one thing I definitely have to say is I love how they did the art for the characters when you see them on like the select screen, and of course when you see them in the with the win poses. And now you're going to notice really quick here that I had changed up my team a little bit. What had happened is that with that team with the 4 characters, I had totally got beaten by Dan and Sagat here. So I had to change up my team a bit. The only real difference is I traded Benny Maru and Dan for Ken Masters. And then I just kept Sakura and Cammy. It's not so much that Dan himself is so hard because he's only a ratio 1 character. Sagat can be a bit hard with all the crazy moves that he does. The only thing I do warn anybody who ever plays any game that has Dan Hibiki in it is that he's one of those characters that if you really like take him for granted and you don't really think he's gonna beat you, the character could really just like kind of get the drop on you and can really beat you if you just take him for granted and think it's gonna be like a walk in the park. And of course here's Sagat, who's actually, as I was mentioning earlier with the ratios, he's a ratio 3 character, so he's actually a bit tougher of a character. Plus, if you've ever played any Street Fighter game, Sagat can be a bit cheap, especially in like Street Fighter 2 when he do his Tiger Shot all the time with his Tiger Uppercut. He doesn't do it nearly as much in this game as he did it in earlier games, but, you know, he does enough of it. And now another thing to make mention of here is the theme from Geese Howard's stage, which is called Vigor Force, contains a sample from the original Star Trek series, Season 1, Episode 10, the Corbomite Maneuver. The sample says, "You are being taken under our power to your destination." That's actually something I really didn't even know until I actually had read this bit. And the funny part is, when I had actually lost against Sagat here, I had actually lost so bad that all 4 of my characters were badly beaten before I even I had got to that far with Sagat. And if I recall correctly, Dan himself took out at least 1 character, and Sagat took out the rest. And now you can notice once again my team has changed. I replaced Cammy and Sakura with Ryu. And what I'm probably going to do before I actually end up uploading this is I'm going to subtitle the actual parts with the text, so you'll actually know what is said. I'll just pull some video of this actually be playing it in English and just kind of overlay the English. And now, if you notice what Geese just did a second or two ago there, that move where he just kind of throws you over his head, it is so easy to actually get hit by that. And if he uses it too much, he really can destroy you really quickly. And now I'll have to make mention here that there are so many times that I actually had done this fight. The first one, of course, was as that 3-character team: Sakura, Ken Masters, and Cammy, and they got beaten. Then I had tried a couple of other teams, like I tried just Goki on his own because he's ratio 4. I also tried Evo Ryu on his own, and I tried a few other teams, and just they kept getting destroyed. And then finally with this team here, I was finally able to take care of him. And now, what you're about to see is something I've never had happen. Until this very fight, I've never had a double KO in this game. And I was like, I could remember myself, like, I was tired, I was playing this game, and I was like, what the hell? Wow, double KO, I didn't think that was possible in this game. But, it's one of those things, like for instance, in a lot of 3D fighting games, I've had double KOs happen a lot more, but I think even in my, recording my Tekken footage for the Tekken 2 video, I actually had a lot of, stuff like that happen. And now at this point you can see how low my life is. I was kind of just desperate, so I did every cheap tactic I could possibly do to drain some of his life, and of course shield myself from some of his projectiles. And, like, when it comes to, like, a moment like this in a fighting game, your best part is to distance yourself as much as possible from your enemy. Because he's going to try some really cheap move to finally get you. And as you can see, I just barely got through this. I'm sure if I had tried a little bit longer, I probably would have, like, had a bit of a better win, and it wouldn't have been, like, as cheap as that was. And I'm gonna let you enjoy this video here. Okay, and that was the arcade version of Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000 Pro. I definitely have to say, as far as 2D fighting games go, just like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, this is an excellent game that if you're into these 2D fighting games from Capcom, I would highly recommend it. It's just one of those games that's honestly really fun, and any Capcom SNK fan should absolutely give this game a try. If not on Naomi, on your PlayStation or your Dreamcast, this game is just a lot of fun, and especially if you got a friend to play with, you're going to have like all kinds of crazy combinations that you can do. And one thing I definitely say about these credits is they're actually some pretty crazy credits. Instead of your normal, like, going up and down the screen like a lot of games will do, they're just kind of like, they come from the foreground and kind of like go into the background. Kind of like a weird twist on how the, you would have your normal text scroll. It kind of does kind of a 3D thing, since it has the Naomi hardware to work with, and it doesn't just have the, let's say the CPS or something like that. And from what I understand, another thing I didn't make mention of is this game actually uses a bit of a modified Street Fighter Alpha engine. So that's why all the characters look all, like, animated and stuff. And of course, since I hadn't been playing much of this, I have the first rank for the name entry. It's not really a big deal, of course, because this game, it's not like it's been on location all that long. I just had started up a few times, did a couple of practices here and there to make sure everything was working right, and of course here we are. So yeah, this was definitely a great game. I'd recommend it to anybody who's ever played a 2D fighting game and liked it, or anyone who just is into collecting arcade games. You wouldn't really go wrong with this game. And I shall see you later in my next video. Bye.
So